Welcome all. Today I shall be discussing the last 6 stanzas of Bradstreet's Prologue. In the last video I have discussed how in stanza 1 Bradstreet humbly sets aside themes of kings and cities, meaning epic subjects for poets and historians, and in stanza 2 how she goes on to versify her admiration for the French poet of divine poetry, Du Bartas. So now let's read the remaining stanzas. So here we begin from stanza 3. From schoolboy's tongue no rhetoric we expect, nor yet a sweet consort from broken strings, nor perfect beauty where some main defect. My foolish broken blemished muse so sings, and this to mend, alas, no art is able, 'cause nature made it so irreparable. In this stanza, the poet is speaking about imperfection and its failure to do things of worth. From schoolboy's tongue no rhetoric we expect. This means that we cannot expect a schoolboy to be adept in rhetorics or in poetry writing or in the use of ornamental language necessary for poetry. And this is because he is inexperienced and is imperfect in age. Rhetorics and poetry, both of this needs one to have a kind of skill on one hand, and on the other hand, depth also is needed. And both of this, the skill and depth, both of this comes with age. The second line, nor yet a sweet consort from broken strings, also makes a similar proposition. Consort means spouse or companion. The line here intends to say that from a broken string, meaning defective musical instrument, no sweet melody can come out. The third line speaks of perfect beauty. If there is a big defect, then that cannot go on to make a perfect beauty, right? If someone has, say for instance, a squint eye, or someone has a nose which is blunt. Now, it's not something that I'm not body shaming, but the thing is, according to the ideal definition of beauty, a person with a squint eye or a person with a blunt nose does not qualify as a beautiful person. So this is something that she is meaning here. And after these 3 examples, what she does is, she speaks of herself. She says that her muse is foolish, broken, and blemished. Now remember that in my last video I have spoken about the 10th muse, which is actually not a muse coming from the Greek religion and mythology. It was just a title that Plato used for Sappho as a word of appreciation. Here also she is using the word muse in similar vein and creating her own rhetoric from it. The muse that she is talking about is a personalized muse. In the next line, she says that the fault with her muse cannot be repaired with any form of art, and the reason to this she gives in the last line of the stanza, that it's because nature made it so irreparable. Now see, she had since her birth received Puritan education, right? And as per Puritanism, or as per the theological discourses of Puritanism, women are flawed. The original sin, remember? Thus, their nature is such that they cannot be cured, and so this imperfection that is coming out of her gender, means out of Bradstreet's gender, the fact that she is a female, is something she cannot do away with. And this is the reason of her imperfection. So she is talking about her gender as her imperfection. Now, her gender and imperfection, she means, has become, these 2 things means she is a woman and hence she is imperfect. And these 2 things actually is a part of her existence. So whatever means or whatever method she adopts, what will happen is she will remain this imperfect being that she is on account of her gender. Now, so this stanza is, what is significant is that she, in spite of creating good poetry like the earlier stanzas, is calling herself inferior. So now the question here arises is whether she is humble or is she sarcastic? Well, this we'll be checking for ourselves through the reading of the remaining stanzas. So now stanza 4. Nor can I, like that fluent sweet-tongued Greek who lisped at first in future times speak plain, by art he gladly found what he did seek, a full requital of his striving pain. Art can do much, but this maxim's most sure, a weak or wounded brain admits no cure. So here in the first two lines, she is talking about a sweet-tongued Greek who had problem with speech but later became a good orator. Here, Bradstreet is talking about Demosthenes, a famous orator from ancient Athens, who it's said that with hard work and practice overcame his speech impediment. He had problem with his speech. His speech was his speech was hindered, means he had problem. He used to, mumble for words actually. Now, he is referred to as sweet-tongued on account of his master oratory, that he somehow, on account of his hard work and practice, became a master orator. So this line appears like a turning point, for after talking in the last three stanzas about imperfection, now what she is doing is, she is talking about recovery or about moving beyond imperfections and excelling also, not only just moving beyond imperfection, but being recognized as a master. Now see, she in the third line says that it's through art that he recovered, and it was art that made it possible for him to find what he was searching, which can here mean both mastery over speech and also cure of speech impediment. And so what she is telling now in the fourth line, she says that Demosthenes got a full compensation for his pain, a full requital of his striving pain. Here, she gives a thesis that art is something that can work as a cure also, and that is why, or that is how Demosthenes got cured, right? And this she considers as a true maxim. But the last line is again where she brings back the theme of inferiority that is associated with her gender maybe. For what she is telling is, she says that a weak or wounded brain cannot be cured even by art, which means she intends to say that in spite of Demosthenes being cured by art, there is no hope in case of her. Because why? Because her brain is weak and wounded. Now, see here, by weak she intends to point at the way patriarchal society or Puritan society considers women to be. And by wounded, she hints at the reaction of such a consideration. The feelings that is there within her. She is hurt, she is wounded. Thus, in this line, she is not merely talking about her inferiority, but is actually indicating societal prejudices and how it affects destroying the chances of a hopeful living. So now, let's move on to the next stanza, stanza 5. I am obnoxious to each carping tongue, who says my hand a needle better fits. A poet's pen, all scorn I should does wrong, for such despite they cast on female wits. If what I do prove well, it won't advance. They will say it is stolen or else it was by chance. So here in this stanza, the poet for the first time is voicing her dissent, her protest. She says she is obnoxious, meaning disgusting or hated to each carping tongue, which means to each complaining tongue or complaining person, according to whom she says in the second line that her hand is fit only for the needle. This implies that she should confine herself with household works and not enter into the male domain of pen, paper and poems. Thus here she is presenting the societal restriction. In the third line she says, the poet's, meaning here again the male poet, the poet's pen are full of scorn or abuse or criticism about the idea of her writing poems, for they are sure that she will wrong or be faulty in the use of the craft of poetry writing. In the fourth line, she narrates the reason for such a contemptible idea. She says, it's because of despite, meaning contempt, they have within themselves regarding female wit or intelligence, means they have a very low idea about female intelligence or wit. The prejudice of the society that she was living in becomes clear in the next lines. If what I do prove well, it won't advance. They will say it is stolen or else it was by chance. So what she's telling here, she says here that even if through her writing she proves her craftsmanship, that won't advance her case or position. For in such a case, they will say that either she has stolen from some male poet or that it happened by chance and hence has nothing to do with her skills or expertise. So you can well understand that initially, perhaps we felt that she was being humble, she was humble in her approach, but no, there was certain tinge of sarcasm working behind her humbleness. She is perhaps being very meticulous in her progression. She is presenting her case or she is presenting her reasoning and logic very carefully. Okay, so now let's move on to stanza 6. But sure the antique Greeks were far more mild, else of our sex, why feigned they those 9? And poesy made Calliope's own child. So amongst the rest they placed the arts divine. But this wick not they will full soon untie. The Greeks did not but play the fools and lie. Now see, in the preceding stanzas, she voices against the prejudices of the patriarchal and Puritan society. And now what she is doing here, she is making a farther progress, a careful one and a logical one. In the first 3 lines, she is speaking of the Greeks and the Muses. The Greeks in their assessment of women, she says, were mild and not extremist. And so, she says, the 9 muses of the Western classical literature were female and not male. You can see here in the screen the pictures of the muses. They are all female. She also speaks in the 3rd line about Calliope, and poesy made Calliope's own child. Now, Calliope is the muse of epic poetry. If you remember in the first stanza, she has referred to the topics of kings and wars as beyond her inferior pain's ability. And now she uses the same as a boomerang, for she adds a reminder. She reminds that the muse of poetry dealing with such themes, that is the theme of epic poetry, is also a female. So, as I said, she is meticulous and logical in her defense and also balanced and calm. It can also be said that at this point, what appeared as humbleness of her tone initially was actually sarcasm. The poet has been careful and skillful enough to keep the reader in a kind of hanging position, oscillating between the 2 poles but unable to come to a confirmed conclusion regarding this, that whether she is being humble or whether she is sarcastic. In the 3rd line, she refers to the high regards that the Greeks had for arts. They considered the arts as divine, which hence puts further emphasis on the connection between women and poetry that the poet here intends to point to with reference to the classical forefathers. In the next 2 lines, she presents her views on what her opponents will say. But this wick knot they will soon untie. So, whatever logic she is presenting is a weak knot. She is trying to create her argument, tying many ends together. But she says that this is a weak knot because the main of her society will diffuse the knot, making her claims invalid by remarking that the Greeks are dumb fools and also liars. Thus, by our analysis of this stanza, it can be said that she is in no way a person of weak wit or intelligence. Her intellect is very much evident in this stanza in the logical reasoning that she presents here. Now, let's move on to the next stanza. In stanza 8, the poet writes, "Let Greeks be Greeks and women what they are. Men have precedency and still excel. It is but vain unjustly to wage war. Men can do best and women know it all. Preeminence in all and each is yours. Yet grant some small acknowledgement of ours. So what she is telling here, she sounds very compromising here, and her desire is only for some small acknowledgements. She begins by putting her hands up in context of defense of Greeks and women, and she says that men have precedency, which implies that they are first and foremost in society, and so it goes without saying that they will excel. So she is not presenting any argument for Greeks and women further. And here she also says that to wage a war against them, against the Greeks, is something very stupid. In the third line, what she says? She says that men can do best and women are aware of that. Now see, she has put her hands and head down before the patriarchal society. And so men are superior and all credit and appreciation belongs to them. Means women know that men are the best. Women agree to it. And so she is giving all credit and appreciation to the male. She is in a way boosting the male ego. But then in the last line, she humbly says that she begs for the acknowledgement of very small achievements of the female gender. She is not asking for things big, but she is requesting them, she is begging from them to acknowledge that okay, women are capable of doing small things. Okay. So now let's move on to stanza 8. And oh ye high-flown quills that soar the skies, and ever with your praise still catch your praise. If ever you design these lowly lines your eyes, give thyme or parsley wreath, I ask no bays. This mean and unrefined ore of mine will make your glistering gold but more to shine. So the poet refers to the male poet as high-flown quills. During those times, pens of the poets were made of bird feathers, and hence the reference here combines the image of the pen with the high achievements of the poets. Feathers, the birds soaring high in the sky, and also the quills that they are using for writing. So these two images are combined in the first line. In the second line, keeping up with the metaphor of poet as bird, she combines the word pray and praise to show the nature-talent conflict that is present in the male. Through the line, the poet intends to say that the prey of the male poet as bird, that is the women, are also praising them. So that shows their power. So the poet is humble as well as sarcastic in this stanza, as you can see. In the next line, she gets back to her humble tone and makes one last modest request. If by any chance they find merit in her poetic lines, then to reward her with thyme or parsley. She demands no laurels, for the laurel crown was a symbol of prestige for the men. During those times, according to the classical, in the classical times, what happened is, it was given to the winners of poetry competition. So you can well understand that she is not claiming the items of their prestige. She is not, claiming that she is equal to the men. Whereas, what she is asking for thyme and parsley wreath. Now, these are the cooking herbs. Okay, so she is being humble here, that she doesn't want to enter into the male domain. She's very happy with thyme and parsley, and that means considering that as, or making a wreath out of that, is fine with her. Finally, in the last line, she says that a slight recognition of the unrefined ore that is evident in her poetry will only make the work of male poet more appreciated in comparison. So, hence, their work, the work of the male poet, will shine like a glistening gold. So what she is doing here, she is even bribing. She is trying to bribe the male poet also. That okay, if your poem is read in comparison to mine, what will happen is, it will only outshine mine. Means everyone will praise yours, because my poetry is not something that is coming out of a refined ore. It is unrefined. It is still in its budding state. It is raw. It is of inferior quality. So only through competition, what will happen is that you will outshine my work. So hence, she wants a slight degree of recognition. So well, this brings us to the end of the analysis of the poem. In the next video, I shall be discussing the important themes with reference to the poem. I hope that you all have understood today's analysis. Thanks to all of you for joining me.